Welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loan, and media. It is a good day when we can have fish and game expert, retired realtor, retired loan officer, Shane Keefauver on the line with us. Thank you so much for being on today, man.
Hey, it's been my pleasure.
Yeah, we actually got connected through one of our old podcasts. If you had the opportunity to hear when we spoke with Julian and Melissa, they were like, yeah, we have a friend. We think he would be great for the podcast because, he was really, really integrated into the market. He was really doing a lot of stuff. And then you and I were kind of talking. You're like, well, I've kind of made this transition. And I was like, you know what? I think that would still be pretty awesome to hear about. And so you're at Fish and Game now. How long have you been there?
Since January.
Okay.
Basically, I just went back to a position that I held before I went into real estate.
Nice. And how are you liking it? Are you happy to be back? We got to say yeah, right? Because we're being recorded.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm with a different department, so I'm doing oil spill response and prevention. Very action oriented. There's a good amount of desk work, but last job I had, it was all desk work. I would go in the field like a couple times a year, but here it's like every month I'm out doing something. So it's been pretty good.
That's awesome. I used to work for the Boy Scouts, and we actually had a pretty good relationship with Fish and Game. I think obviously for the overarching idea of outdoor activities and youth in the community and things like that. And so I always really enjoyed my interactions with them. They're always very knowledgeable, and they would come and put on, I believe they came to Scout Expo, and they would put on like a booth and talk about that sort of thing. So I always thought that was very cool.
Yeah, they're very interactive with the community. Kind of separates fish and wildlife from other branches of the state government. Is they are really out there and trying to educate and trying to help people learn about different things like fish permitting or campsites or the process and trying to get all that. It can be a little crazy because technologically speaking, the state's usually behind the industry, the private sector.
Sure.
So it's, you're used to one platform and then you go to the state and it's a little bit slower or doesn't have the functionality, but they're pushing for it. They're trying. Yeah.
Sure. Being here in Sacramento, where we do this podcast and where most of our guests are coming from, it's very common to have friends that work for the state, right? Or work for the government here. I have quite a bit of friends that work for the state, a lot who their goal was like, that's what I want to do, as well as one of my really good friends who is a part-time realtor with me. He works at CalPERS, at Caltrans. And I always thought it could be a really good option for me, but also I'm a little impatient, and I know that sometimes the state can move a little bit slow. And then I also, when I was younger and I was in college, I worked for the Department of General Services, and I worked for the investment office for CalPERS. And that was when all the furloughs were happening, and it was a really weird time to be with the state. And it kind of made me be like, maybe this isn't a great idea, but I think maybe that time is behind us.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, even during COVID, before I came on, there were furloughs, and there was an actual 10% reduction in income.
Oh, wow.
So people took a 10% pay cut in order to work, but it was, that part sucks. But at the same time, people were still able to work from home 100% of the time. So it's kind of like you save on gas, I guess.
Yeah, kind of maybe a trade-off for some people, depending on how far you live.
Yeah, and then once things opened up, they got it back up and running again.
There you go. From the word of the fish here, or the mouth of the fish, he's telling us things are going all right here at the state. So I do want to jump into, real estate. When was it that you got licensed?
It was back in, it was I believe I was licensed in 2017.
Okay. And what made you want to kind of jump in? I don't know if you decided I'm going to do this full time, or if you're like, no, I'm just going to dabble and get my license.
Yeah. So I was with the state, fish and wildlife in the fisheries branch at that point. I was in 4 years at that time. And I started learning more about real estate investing, got involved with a company, one of those guru courses,
All right.
uh, the total ripoff. Didn't do jack.
Uh,
Don't ever do anybody who's listening to this, don't ever do a guru course. They're nothing but talk. Uh, but I still had the itch because I started getting into it and
mhm,
then not knowing how the process works, contracts, what the real estate agent is for, title companies for. Like I knew nothing,
mhm,
and I got an escrow on a property, and I was running the numbers, and I was like, man, like they accepted my offer, but it's still not low enough. Like it doesn't meet the threshold, and I think I was looking at least a 10% profit
mhm,
at that point. And I didn't know any other alternative strategies, so I backed out of it and kind of felt like a failure a little bit because I spent some money doing inspections on it. My realtor was kind of not happy with me.
mhm,
So I kind of went away for it for a couple months. And then a friend of mine that I met at a meetup group, she got me involved with EXP. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, if I become an agent, I can learn the basics and
mhm,
then develop that into flipping. So 2017, I got my real estate license, still at the state. And then in July 2018 is when I went full time real estate, left the state position. Because at that time, I had some traditional transactions under my belt, some extra money was coming in. I was able to take out my cow purrs. So that was able to last me a little while.
mhm.
And I got involved with a newer company that was all about flipping and developing. And what they wanted to do is train people so that they can build up the company. And everything just kind of lined up at that point. And my wife and I were like, you know what? If there's a time to do it, I might as well just do it now. You know, I have a comfortable state job. I make after taxes, it was like 4,000 a month, which
Mhm.
is pretty good, nice and stable. And so I left, basically had a 2 week panic attack, not knowing what the heck to do. The company I was with, they didn't really train very well. So it was me just working with a transaction coordinator all the time who
Mhm.
is incredible and absolutely amazing and should be paid 10 times more than what she is.
Oh, I'm sure
Uh,
all the TCs are out there are happy to hear that.
oh yeah. Oh man. She held that whole company up.
Mm,
Um, she was there answering questions, letting people know how to fill out their contracts or amendments or negotiate. Like she was basically the broker,
mhm.
but instead of getting paid a few $100 per file plus, brokerage stuff,
Right.
she was just getting the few hundred a file,
Mhm.
and which is a shame because the owners weren't doing anything. Um, and so I was getting heavily involved in the flipping and development side. That's what I wanted to be in. I started working on shoot, what is it called? See, now I'm blanking out on it. Tax benefits for developing in areas that are lower income
Sure.
or uh, they wanted the city and the state, they've kind of pushed to have lower income housing.
Mhm.
And so I put all my heart and energy into that. And the company, they saw that I brought in over $500,000 for their flips through investors,
That's great.
either most of them that I just met, um, and so that they can get their flips rolling. And so at the end of 2019, uh, my traditional sales kind of slagged, and I had the biggest month ever in December of 2019. And then I didn't have another deal until actually, I think my last deal was like February or January 2021, I think,
Mhm.
or something like that. So I didn't have a deal for a while. COVID didn't help. But when I was helping one of the owners list their property, one that they flipped, they didn't buy it and flip it. They just had it under contract. We're going to
Mhm.
fix it up, pay off the seller a little bit, and the company was going to keep whatever profits. But unfortunately, it was at that point that when he put me on to list it and he was like, hey, 50-50 split on the commission, I was like, yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, once I got the estimated settlement sheet, I was like, you don't know how to run numbers. Like, best case scenario, we don't get a commission.
Mm-hmm.
And the company doesn't profit because you borrowed money to do this. And I was like, my whole world just was like, wait, you don't know what you're doing at all. Like, I was
Mm-hmm.
questioning it. But then once that happens, and then COVID hit, and then I wasn't having any of my sales come through. That's when I kind of reassessed what I was doing there. And another agent that left, two agents that left that company started doing loans.
Mm-hmm.
And so in July of 2020, I got my mortgage loan originator license and started doing loans for them. And that was awesome. It was more my realm. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
environmental scientist by nature. I'm a scientist, so I'm very numbers oriented, black and white. Traditional sales is very emotionally driven, and loans are more, yes, you can buy this, or no, you can't, but
Right.
this is what you can do to get there. So I like the education part of real estate in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was doing that with that company, and then I left them to go to a different mortgage broker. Um, and the thing that I stumbled on throughout my real estate career was that I'm not a salesperson. I hate sales. I hate, asking friends and family all the time, like, hey, you buying, you selling, you refinancing. And I've been burned by so many people close to me that it just got exhausting. By burn, I mean, when my best friend, I helped him. I was like, hey, like, have you thought about refinancing? Rates are like 2.5% right now. I know you
Right.
have great credit, you have a ton of equity. And he came to me and he was like, hey, two banks said that I can't get a loan because the loan value is too low.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what? You owe like 90,000 on your home. What do you mean you can't refinance the rate on that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You can. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, cool, I'm refinancing. I'm like, what? He went with his original loan officer from like 8 years ago. I'm like, dude, really? So, and I've had some high school friends do that. I've spent full days driving them around, and then they just leave me in the dust for somebody else. It's like,
It
uh,
can be
I
a
have,
really emotionally taxing. You and I didn't have much of a conversation. I'm a licensed realtor. I'm a licensed loan officer. I'm a VP at our company, so I run our media division as well. And I've had that same experience. It could be really taxing to be like, I'm putting in all this time, putting in all this effort. Like we're supposed to be, friends or close. And yeah, it's business, but also, it is your friends. And so when it happens to you, you're kind of like, man, that was a bummer, and you kind of see a new side of these people and you don't want to hold it against them necessarily, but also you're like, come on, man, like we're friends, you're supposed to help me out. So I've definitely understand how you feel about that.
I think what hurt more is it's like, how do you view me as a professional
Mm,
if you're just gonna use me like that,
mm-hmm.
Like, it sucks, to be burned like that on an emotional level, but to kind of be like, well, why did you do that to me? Like, do you not think I know what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that part hurt. And it sucks.
It does. Yeah, it's pretty tough. And for you guys that are realtors out there, at some point in your time, you will somebody who's relatively close to you, who you feel like you could have did business for, will work with somebody else. And it could be purely just based off the fact that you didn't market yourself enough to them and they went with somebody else, or the fact that maybe they just didn't feel comfortable. And I am, because you've done both of this, that this happens a lot more on the loan side because people are really protective of their finances and they can be kind of scared off and feel like embarrassed that you're going to take a look at their finances. Maybe they're not happy with some of the stuff that they're doing. And no matter what the case is, it kind of stings a bit, it really does sting a bit. And I would imagine more so if you've already engaged with them and then you kind of feel like, well, what is it about my business acumen that you're not happy with or whatever it is, you start to question that, right? And I think this is a really telling part of real estate. I'm so happy I have you on because so many times people don't get to hear this part of the conversation that's happening. And it is a real part of this conversation. And man, it's a bummer sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I got burned really ticked me off. She was actually a coworker of mine, and when I was with the state, I was like, "Hey, I can list your home." She's like, "Yeah, yeah, do it, do it." And then she's like, "No, my dad said I should go with somebody more experienced." I'm like, "All
Mm,
right, I totally understand. This would have been my first listing. You're gonna go with somebody with 25 years experience." And ultimately, I was the reason why she sold her home because I held her house open. They
mm,
had like 60 people come through and only one offer was, and that was the night that I was there.
wow.
But it wasn't my buyer. They already had an agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I helped her pro bono I mean, I helped her a lot. I ended up like dislocating my knee, handing out flyers for
Oh
her.
no.
And then I helped her buy, and she did use me to buy in Livermore. And then when she was going to list it, I was doing loans. I recommended again somebody who's been in the industry like 25 years that I worked with that
Mm-hmm.
I know goes way above and beyond the call of duty to help his clients. And she grilled him like crazy. And when she first listed her home, she grilled that agent like crazy. Like they're both like, what is this woman doing? She's
Mm-hmm.
insane. And so I was doing her loan, and she didn't like the realtor I sent her. And she got an escrow on her dream home. She said that realtor was in the business 40 years and wouldn't want anything to do with her either.
Mm.
And everything fell apart. She ended up getting a new realtor. And I'm like, hey, I'm so excited you got a new realtor. She's like, yeah, I also got a new loan officer with a better rate.
Oh.
And I'm like, I priced you out a month and a half ago. You're at least half a percentage point lower than you are now, but you didn't even bother to talk to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the last time, like I helped her so much and she's just like, no,
Right.
enough of you.
Yeah. So I want to jump back a little bit just because we've gone through so much of your story. This program that you signed up for, the Guru program, what made you want to sign up for something like that? And why didn't you feel that it was a value? Because I feel like, especially now, over the last, 5 years with the growth, really the gigantic expansion of TikTok, with obviously Instagram and Facebook continue to grow, where Meta's starting to grow. People are really you're seeing a very pyramid version of real estate where it's like, okay, I'm going to do a little bit of real estate and then I'm going to create a coaching course, right? And so I'm wondering, when you were getting into that, was that similar at that time, or was it just like, well, I need to learn something, I don't know where, so I'm just going to do this?
Yeah, pretty much not knowing where to start. And my father-in-law he's a full-time investor right now. He
Okay.
retired as a mechanical engineer, and he got a flyer for this. I think it was what are their names? Tara and Tar Christine. I don't know. One of the
Something.
house flipping
Something.
shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they were advertising this free seminar. So it's like, hey, you and my wife should go. And I was like, all right. We checked it out. And we're like, man, we could potentially make a lot of money doing this. But
Hmm.
of course, they make it sound so easy.
Right. Like how
and
HGTV makes it seem like it's easy to completely remodel your house on a weekend.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
like two weeks, full gut. Like, yeah, no problem. Don't have to worry about permitting or anything.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we did that. And then, they just kept asking for money. It was like,
Hmm.
hey, if you want to learn more about real estate and these advanced courses, pay us like $10,000. And at that point, we did do that because we are like, you know what? I think we can do this.
Hmm.
We can afford it. Let's just give it a shot. But when push came to shove, all it was me talking to a quote unquote coach in Utah, and he was just basically agreeing with what I was saying. I was like, so I should probably do mailers or something like that. He's like, yep, yeah, you probably should. Oh, okay. All right. Do I hand them out? Do I mail them? Yeah, yeah, mail them. Oh, it was bad.
Did they
It,
teach you at all how to do like acquisition cost and like the amount of time you can hold it to cash flow, and like what sort of, did they teach you anything like that, or were they just like, this is how you get, investment properties?
Kind of. They did show us how to do the cost in the breakdown. In my opinion, they didn't go into enough detail.
Mm-hmm.
They were very generic about it. And so they were like, hold back 3% for closing costs.
Mm-hmm.
Pay realtor fees. So that, the gist of it,
Sure.
which was helpful because I was able to run numbers on the properties I saw. Nothing really panned out
Mm-hmm.
except for one ish. But most, I mean, I think the last event we went to, except I think it was in Vegas and we flew down there. The dude that was talking was like such a narcissist. He
Mm.
was like showing pictures of himself shirtless and like, this is what I do because of real estate. I make
Right.
movies, I have audio, and look at me shirtless and did it. I'm karate. And it's like, I don't
I'm
care.
karate. That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
he's like
Yeah.
funding his own movies from real estate. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like,
No, well, it's funny
all
you bring
right,
that up because, our brokerage, we're in the process of expanding. We're moving down to LA. And we primarily are here in Sacramento, but we're setting up branches down there. And my broker and I have had this conversation because he's been in the industry for about 25 years. And before TikTok and really how accessible information is on the internet, especially free information, on YouTube. The only way you could get this information was to go to courses, right? You had to go to seminars, you had to go to these networking events, you had to sign up for this stuff. And so he was telling me that the main reason he stopped doing that was because of people like that. Every time he would go to something, it would be like some guy would stand up and he'd be like, this is my Rolex. These are my gold watches. These are my Lamborghinis. This is why I'm successful. This is what you need to do. Right. And he'd be like, first off, if you were actually financially sound, you probably wouldn't be wasting all your money on that stuff. And you would be
yep,
putting it into your business and you're investing in things like that. But it's just like that's not valuable content. Right. And so it's just funny that you bring that up because that is the exact thing that like we're trying to get education out, but we're trying to do it in a way where it's not. I guess the best word to do is douchey, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
the reality of it. So you're at this place and you're clearly not having a great time listening to this guy out here in Vegas.
yeah, no way. So we flew back and we had our coach and whatever. And at this point, my wife was kind of tapering off of it.
Mm,
She had done sales for 15 years. She was tired of sales. She
mm-hmm.
didn't want to do door to door. She didn't want to cold call, and I hate that stuff too. Um, and yeah, I mean that company fell apart. I think there was a class action lawsuit against them. Basically, like Trump, they're essentially Trump University, but on a smaller scale,
Mm,
less notoried, less notary.
right.
Or what am I
So
thinking?
you
You
took
know what I
this
mean?
course and then you got licensed and then you joined a brokerage that focused on investing. Is that the right timeline for that?
Pretty much, yeah. So I stopped with the guru people in December of 2017, and then I got my real estate license that following May
Mm-hmm.
of 2019, and that's when I was with EXP. I had
How'd you like that?
co- it was all right. I mean, I need hands on
Mm-hmm.
personally to learn. I need somebody to show me exactly what to do. The person who was training me was phenomenal. She was amazing. I learned a ton with her. When this other company came for flipping, I was like, man, this is what she and I had a conversation. She's like, you know what, this is what you've always wanted to do,
Mm.
more flipping than traditional sales. So I think you should probably take this opportunity, but just, be wary about them.
Yeah, no,
The
it's
bigger talkers there
interesting.
are.
It's interesting you say that about EXP. I haven't had anybody on from EXP yet. I'm looking for somebody because we have some realtors that have come over from EXP, and I've heard the main thing that's taught there is recruiting.
Mhm.
But it sounds like you got somebody that was good over you, who was empathetic, who understood what you wanted, and was actually coaching you. And so that's good to hear that they're, were people over there and she was pushing you and saying, maybe you don't need to be here, maybe you need to be over there. So for me, that's comforting.
It was tough though, because you have to find your own coach.
Mm,
At least when I was there,
okay.
and I called like 14 or 15 different real estate agents that are deemed coaches with EXP, and I got 3 callbacks, and a
That's
text
really
message.
interesting.
Yeah, and only 2 of them were like willing to work with me.
Yeah, because the
So it took a
main,
while.
the main, I hate to use the word like scheme, but the main profit building there outside of generating your own real estate is having people under you and profit sharing off of them, right? And so
Yeah,
I know that for people who are highly successful at EXP, that is why one of the reasons they are successful because they're so good at recruiting, they're so good at getting people under them and teaching them how to bring people on. And obviously they're closing real estate because they're profitable and they're doing stuff like that. But that's surprising to hear that that's the way that setup is. That they're like, hey, we have coaches available. Good luck. Hopefully one of them's free for you.
yeah. I mean, that was what, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So hopefully they've changed a little bit.
Mm,
I don't know, but yeah, it was different. And then their online interface is interesting. It's kind of cool, but I feel like it's too gimmicky. Like
mm,
I want quality trainings. I don't
right.
want to, I don't care about waving to somebody in a virtual classroom.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it was last year they had launched their EXP VR setup,
Oh,
and I
wow.
thought, oh man, that's really cool. Like I'd like to go and check that out, but I think you could only do it if you were at EXP or maybe if you're invited or something like that. But um, yeah, that's pretty interesting. So you get in with this flipping company, right? And this is all in Sacramento, I assume, because
Yeah.
yeah, oh, we're all in Sacramento. So you get in with this
Yeah.
flipping company, and then you're saying that they also didn't have any training available.
Not really. They started to, but apparently the person that was brought in to train
Mm.
the agents wasn't being compensated like they were promised.
Oh
And
man.
so they're like, well, why am I going to spend all this time creating business plans, helping people get their business plans, and strategically figuring out? Because now he's crushing it with prime real estate,
Mm.
and th- they weren't paying him, according to him. So he was like, well, I'm not doing it then.
Yeah,
And
that's a
nothing
tough
happened
place to
after that.
be in from an org standpoint because those sort of operational positions, right, can only be paid through essentially, and especially in real estate, through the sales and any sort of monthly transactionals or things like that you have with your clients. Unless that broker is going to pay out of pocket from whatever else money that they have. And so a lot of companies have trouble, especially smaller brokerages, bringing on people like that and compensating them correctly. But it's a necessary thing to grow, right? And you either bring people on like that and you can actually, train your people correctly and bring more money in, or you apparently cheap, you be cheap and they leave and go kill it somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what happened. Long story short, the whole company is pretty much gone now. They had at one point around 40 agents, about 15 to 20 were active, and a lot of them are doing great things right now,
Mm,
but they didn't foster education. And so when I was they brought me on as a VP to their flipping stuff, and I was supposed to have a mentor, which was one of the owners, but there was never any education. It was like, hey, there's a fire happening at this property, what do we do? Not a literal fire, but like,
yeah,
project manager is fighting with the contractor, like
right,
what's going on? It's like, oh yeah, 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 let's handle it. And it's like, well, I'm supposed to be learning from you, not doing things that I've never done before. Like this
right.
doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But then again, they didn't know what they're doing either.
Yeah, man, I
So that,
can't I can't help but feel just like to look at you and obviously you're an intelligent person, you're educated. I can't help but feel like, man, what if you would have just ended up with a couple people that would have actually trained you, right? Who would have actually motivated you, trained you, gave you some opportunities where you, and not to say that you're not happy 100% with where your life currently is, but what that pathway could have looked like for you if you would have been with the right brokerage and had the right team, and things like that. You know, you might have been number one flipper in Sacramento or NorCal or whatever. You know, and we talk about this on the podcast about how critical it is to do research about the brokerages that you're going to work with, you know, what their availabilities are, how they're going to help you, and what the fees associated with all of that stuff are. And I think you're kind of painting a very clear picture for people that, you know, I don't think there's any reason you couldn't have been successful. It's just are a lot of places out there that are just not equipped to help people correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, researching the company definitely helps. I think it's hard because real estate has a lot of individuals that are really big talkers. They have egos, they're narcissistic, and it's hard to sometimes see past that.
Right.
The owner with this company is an extremely smooth talker, the best talker I've ever seen in my life. Like you can say, hey, here's a lamp, go sell it. And he'll give you like a half-hour presentation and end up selling you a piano, like smooth. But that was the issue. Like that's what he was all about. He was all about the showmanship of it, not the production. So like in my time in real estate, the people that I noticed that were the most successful, I didn't really hear about. They weren't boasting it out. They weren't saying, hey, here's my brand new car. You know, they weren't being flashy, like, hey, this is what you need to do to succeed. They're like, hey, this is what I do. If you want to do that, cool. If not, cool. But if you want to join my team, this is what's going to happen, and you're going to have to follow this. Like they have the structure.
Right. Well, oftentimes they're really busy as well, right? It's a really like this took me to be able to get to this point where I could start a podcast because I've been wanting to do it for a long time, and I love coaching and things like that. It's been almost 4 years. And so it's just one of those things where, you know, to be able to work with those sort of people, you have to understand this, like they tend to work at a little bit higher capacity. They tend to, and I think the other like kind of underlining thing that maybe a lot of people don't see is that they're good with their money, right? They're either really good at their money or they're so bad at their money that they have to make sales really frequently. But either way, both of those situations typically lead to high production, and high production leads to spending time in the industry and allows you to help other people, right? Yeah. So just talking a little bit there about that. So you do that course, and then you're with this, brokerage, and that's not really working out. And that's when you're like, okay, I think I'm going to transition over to loans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when that was like March, April of 2020. So COVID was hitting at that point. And yeah, a couple of realtors that I knew got into loans, and I was talking to them about it, and they're like, it's easier than real estate. It's more analytical, more black and white. And I was like, I'm sold. I'm an analytical person. I'm numbers. This sounds interesting to me. And in a lot of ways, it was a lot easier, mostly because of refinances at that point. Like rates were under 3%. Like anybody with an interest rate over 3.5, it was worth refinancing at that point in time. So it was kind of easy to get through, but it was.
Well, a lot of people were hiring at that time in the mortgage industry as well, right? There was the mortgage boom was ridiculous, and it's, you know, you actually got into it pretty close to when I did, because I originally came in on the media side because that's what my background is. Then I got my real estate license, then I got my loan license, but I started processing loans in September of 2020. Yeah, 20. And so I think we were pretty close on when we got into the industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's about right.
So it was, we were busy too. Interesting enough, we didn't do a ton of refinances, but we had a lot of builder accounts that we were with. and we were doing a lot of single family out in the Central Valley, and then we were getting a couple refinances in, and then we're doing that. But I know, and you're starting to see that right now. All of these companies, these mortgage companies that are shutting down or cutting huge parts of their staff, it was because of that mortgage boom, that so many people got hired on. And you were feeling this a lot on the real estate side because this was happening with underwriters because they were trying to find a way to feed the industry. They're bringing on new underwriters and they didn't quite know what they were doing. And so you're kind of having these weird arguments with them, and you're like, that's not Fannie and Freddie. Like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Like, can you explain this more? And they'd be like, well, that's what we do. And I'm like, but that's not the legal thing. Like, you can't just put arbitrary rules on stuff. And so that was a weird time. And now you're starting to see that fall off. But it sounds like you were getting in a good time because there was so much business happening. You were able to put food on your plate and ultimately start to learn the industry, which was nice.
Yeah, that was with the traditional sales and real estate, it just wasn't happening for me. So the loan side definitely carried us into 2021. Without that, I don't think we would have been able to. We would have missed some mortgage payments for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, I know you're saying you're an analytical person, and I haven't fully dove into kind of the difference between a realtor and a loan officer and what that is like day to day. I mention it through the podcast. I'm going to do a dedicated podcast for that because I get a lot of people who ask me, how are you able to hold two licenses? Why do you choose one over the other? And I have to explain to them that my situation is not normal. Like most real estate offices don't let you hold a loan license or practice it, and vice versa and stuff like that. But I'm quite an analytical person too. But by trade, I've done sales since I was 15. I think just because I've always been somewhat personable, as well as I'm a person to person kind of person, as how I've always phrased it. I kind of like being in front of people and things like that, but I always kind of hoped that I wouldn't end up in sales forever because it's kind of it's scary. I mean, if you're honest about it, you don't always know when your paychecks are going to come in, especially in real estate. It's like so many other things can play a factor, the economy, whatever, COVID and a shortage and microchips. I mean, it's crazy, all this stuff. We had a delay. I remember, if I was in a position where I had to rely on my loans, we had a 6-month delay on new construction because of windows, right? I mean, who would have thought? But it just happens. And so when I did get my loan license and I started getting into that side, I started to feel a little more comfortable. And I would say like a little happier just because I don't mind like sitting in front of a computer most of the day, kind of working out. Once you're in it enough time, it's a puzzle, right? You're trying to see where can I navigate this? What lenders have certain regulations that'll allow me to push this loan through, and how do I get it to close in 15 days and all of that stuff. And I find it to be fun in a way that doesn't make my day drag on. Did you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that I really liked about loans is it's more scalable.
Mm,
Like you were mentioning, you could be at home on your computer and you can work on a loan, send it to your processor, or if you have a loan officer assistant, they could do a lot of the work for you
mm-hmm,
when you reach that level. And with real estate, I felt like a lot of my time was not necessarily wasted, but you spend a lot more time with your client,
mm-hmm,
driving around, showing homes. Um, and on the loan side, I feel like it's more educational.
mm-hmm.
A lot of people kind of understand buying a home, but they don't understand the financials behind it. Like,
Right.
what do they need to provide, and what do I need to see in order to get their loan pushed through and funded? And to me, the education part is my favorite. I still love talking real estate to people, like our mutual friends that recommended me for the podcast. I still talk to them about stuff that comes up. And I love that part. That's my favorite part, educating people,
Mm-hmm.
period. But it's also like you're saying, you have to make the sales. Otherwise, what's going to happen next month if something doesn't happen the way it's supposed to. If you only have one deal in the works and it doesn't go through, like that could be a missed mortgage payment. You could, and then it can just train roll from there.
Yeah,
And
and
for me,
you're working from a place of discomfort, you're working from a place of stress. All of those things that really they pile on each other, and it can make it more and more difficult to be on the real estate side, right? I think the big difference as well is that when you're on the real estate side, right, the compensation's a little bit better. Well, it's quite a bit better. It's more than double typically, depending on where you're at. At our brokerage, it's 2.5% commission typically because that's market pricing. And then for the loan side, it's 1%, but it is 1% of the loan amount, not of the purchase price, right? So when you talk about it being scalable, what he means by that is that I can sit and I can work on 20 to 30 loans a month, where it would be nearly impossible for me to be able to show 20 or 30 clients houses in an entire month if they want to see 5 or 10 or 15 houses over 45-minute spans, right? I mean, when would I get any other business done? So that's the nice thing about being on the loan side is if you could have that stuff feeding in, you're able to scale it a lot better. And eventually you kind of get into flow of how to manage everything going through these systems and working with all of the, title and appraisers and inspectors and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I kind of, I think of the loan officer as like, the guy or the girl in the chair in comics, the one that's behind the scenes, communicating, sending the map and the coordinates. And the realtor is like Batman out there in the action, getting beat up.
That's a great way to put it. I would say that's pretty on point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So, when you started doing the LO, you pretty much said, okay, did you say I'm not going to do investing at all anymore? Or did you say I'm just going to put it on the back burner and I'm going to come back to it? I just need to get money in the door.
A little bit of both. At that point, I was kind of done with flipping. I did my own flip Foley up in Pollock Pines and just got destroyed because it got on market in October. And for anybody who works up there, there is no market between October and February. It's dead. It is ice cold. Nothing sells. And so I just had to keep dropping the price. And
is that just because of like Pollock Pines is a lot nicer in the spring and in the summer? It's just a nicer place to be, and you don't really want to drive up there when it's colder.
Probably, yeah. There was definitely an ice storm that I got caught in my little 2-wheel drive Hyundai Elantra that almost crashed. Trying to show somebody the house, and I couldn't even make it to the property. But I was just burned out on it and the people that I was working with. And loans was going to be the new, like, okay, this is going to be what brings in the money for now. Maybe I'll go back into flipping. But probably not.
Yeah. Well, flipping's a hard gig, and we haven't really like talked specifically about it. And flipping and wholesaling, which is what I think the reason that Julian and Melissa kind of pushed you over was because we were talking about how Melissa was getting into wholesaling, right? And I've talked about this before, but it's one of those things where it's like the golden nugget that they put in front of everybody, and they say if you can learn these few little things, you'll make a bunch of money, and you don't even have to be licensed to do it. And so there's like, okay, I don't have to get any education. It's not that hard to do, and you can make a lot of money off it. And that is true. A lot of people do that, but you have to be in the right market. You do need to understand what's going on. It helps to have coaches. And so this part of real estate, which is not traditional transactional, like, single family homes or selling maybe even like secondary homes that are investment properties. These are not true investments. You're talking about you're trying to do your own investment flips, right? That's a really stressful part of the industry. I think more stressful to be in than traditional transactions because those come through for like you're supposed to make more money off them, right? I think typically, it depends on what sort of investor you are, but I pretty much see that people want to make at least $30,000 to $50,000 off these, right? And they don't want to hold them for more than 3 to 5 months. I know other investors, they're like, I don't do it unless I'm going to make $100,000 minimum. And so there's levels of this, but it's that sort of idea that it's like, man, that's, you're far and few between. You're putting out money, you are holding on to it, you're paying all of this stuff. And that's a stressful place to be. So I could totally empathize in being like, yeah, I think I need to take a break from this, especially if your wife was in sales for all that time. She's probably burnt out and you guys are like, all right, let's pull it back a little bit. So you're doing the loans. How many loans are you doing, about a month, or is it consistent at all for you at this time?
No, I haven't done a loan.
Well, I meant when you were
Last
doing
one.
loans.
Oh, I would say one every 2 months on
Okay, so it
average.
wasn't a whole lot either.
No, most of them would fall through. Like it would be realtors sending me family members that couldn't qualify.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
had
a
a fire.
hard part of this industry.
I know. I
Realtors
probably
get
went
so
through.
excited. They're like, "Oh, I got somebody for you. I'm going to send them over. They're good to go because they have like 10 grand saved or whatever." And I'm like, "Dude, this guy like has a freaking 500 credit score." I'm like, "What do you want me to do with this?" Right? Yeah, there
Right.
and and kind of like you said, right? That's what I love about this too is the educational part.
Hmm.
And I tell people like, "Hey, we really need to be talking like 12 to 3 years out because there's so much that goes in. It's not just this isn't 2008 anymore. It's not just that you have a couple $1,000s saved, right? There's a lot of things that can cause this not to go through. I just learned a new one not a couple months ago that if you have more than two late payments on your bank statement, that they will decline your loan. So for some
Wow.
reason you forgot and you are sorry, over withdrawals. If you had two over withdrawals on your account that month, like that's enough reason for them to do it. Now you can talk to the higher up people and hopefully try to get them to like finesse it because there's always kind of a gray area, especially in a struggling market. But I didn't know that. And so you find out stuff like that and you're like, oh, wow, like that's, sorry, now we can't move forward because of this thing, right? It doesn't matter if everything else is good. And so that education part, you're right, really does come through. But even like when I got into the industry, some months we were doing up to almost 30 loans. And then when it started to taper down, we were around 10 loans, somewhere around there, right? And even then, I was kind of like, because I was a processor, I wasn't a loan officer. And you do find that as a processor, you do quite a bit of the work. So it almost
Yeah.
feels like you're a loan officer. There are segments missing, but you're doing a huge bulk of it. And you're kind of like, man, this isn't like great money at as a processor, but you're like, but when I become a loan officer, it'll be better, right? And so I couldn't imagine like even that would be a little bit stressful for me. I probably wouldn't have left my job to tell you the truth because I worked in nonprofit and I had steady money. I was doing really well there. And I probably wouldn't left if they're like, yeah, you're going to do 1 to 2 loans a month or one. I would have been like, nope, sorry, that's not enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah. The company, when I left, nobody was really upfront with me.
Mm.
It wasn't until my mortgage broker, I was talking to him. I was like, hey, man, I'm thinking about going back to the state. He's like, I don't know why you ever left.
Yeah, people love
Yeah. I
working
mean,
for the state, man.
yeah. And this is a guy, I mean, he's making 100+ thousand a month
Mm,
off of his loan. And he's been doing that for, 20 years.
right.
And so he's like, he makes a lot of money a year. And he was like, no, no, you shouldn't have done this. You should have gone with the state, get your license, and you can do it on the side.
Right.
Um,
Well, there's something
I was like,
beautiful about working for the state where, the likelihood of CalPERS completely depleting your guys' pension is very low.
mhm,
California, for some reason, completely failing would be really a weird thing to happen. And even then, you probably wouldn't want to be in real estate if that happened. But I romanticize, I think, working for the state, and a lot of people do, especially because I went to Sac State, and a lot of people are like, oh, I want to work for the state when I get out. That idea of kind of like having, this industry, and when I worked for nonprofit, We kind of say it's a lifestyle to be in this industry. You have to constantly be available. Your work. I mean, we're doing a podcast right now and you're doing it out of the kindness of your heart, but I'm doing it in part because this is my industry, right? And I need to be doing stuff. And so there's always this kind of thing. And I always thought, man, it would be nice. Like you go to work and you're done and nobody bothers you afterwards, hopefully, and nobody bothers you on the weekend and you get your time off and, you're going to have money to retire. Like that sort of whole idea I've always thought would be really nice, but it just never, I don't know, something all for me always drove me to something like this, what I do now, right? Think of the flexibility, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like pursuing your passion,
Mm,
and what makes the most sense. Like, my issue with real estate was the struggle of just making sure monthly income was coming in. And
hmm.
so it became less about the clients and more about the paycheck.
Right.
And that's a terrible place to be. People see through you, and then you ultimately do less deals, less transactions because, you're not your best when you're communicating with them. You're just like, hey, just do this so I can get paid,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And I make a lot more per month from my state job than I did in real estate. And once I clock out, I'm clocked out. I don't have to do anything for the state, and they understand that. That's the good thing about the state is they're like, yeah, you don't have
Hmm.
to work overtime, and if you do, you get compensated either overtime or extra time off. Like there's a lot of ways they compensate, so it's very employee friendly
Right.
in that
Exactly.
aspect.
So you have both licenses active still. Why?
Um, I think it's good to have in general. Like if somebody, I'm not actively going out there, and the transaction I had were all people I know
Hmm.
or friends of a friend, like close referrals. They weren't me mail marketing or calling or anything like that. So if somebody does come to me, I could be like, cool, I can refer you out and get a referral fee instead.
Hmm.
So I'm not working it. I just refer them out. And it's just a way to get a little extra income coming in when it does come up. But it's not, I don't have to stress about it anymore. Like that
Right.
stress is gone.
Yeah, because I think the, NMLS and I guess if you don't pay to be in all the associations, it's much cheaper, right?
Yeah.
So, it's like $800 for that, $600 to $800 plus then the NMLS is $200 or $300 to stay active. But I guess if you don't pay for some of that stuff, which I guess you don't have to if you're just referring, right?
Yeah. For real estate, I don't pay MLS fees. So I don't have access to the MLS,
Hmm.
but I don't need it. And I think I just pay every 4 years you have to renew it,
Right.
which is like not much, 50, $60 to do the test.
Yeah. Have you
And then you have
renewed
to,
already? Have you been
yeah,
in long? Yeah. How was that for you?
yeah, I did this year. It was bad. I'm really good with tests and memorizing information. I'm not, well, short-term memory.
Mm, sure. So, overall, I mean, we're getting pretty close to the end of the podcast, but I hate to say it, but it sounds like it wasn't the best experience for you being in real estate. Is that fair?
Um, for me, like you were talking about earlier, I think if I was partnered with the right people, especially on the development side, because I busted my butt and worked through some really steep hurdles to get us as far as possible. And if I was with somebody experienced that knew what they're doing, we would have multiple 50, 60 room apartments
Hmm.
up and running right now. Um, and my life would be completely different because of that. It is unfortunate that things happen the way they happen. I try not to regret it. I try to learn from it.
Right.
Um, but I feel like ultimately I am where I should be. I love where I'm at right now. And I love having the knowledge in real estate because I can help friends or family make better decisions
Hmm.
and educate them on the overall process from both sides of the spectrum. I feel like if you're only trained in one side, either loans and or realtor, you
Hmm.
don't know the other side very well at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I like being able to talk about both sides with people. And so that's what I always loved. But it's hard to get money in that unless you're, one of those gurus pitching out courses. But it's like, why are you going to take a course from somebody who has like a dozen transactions in
Right.
their career, which is
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
have from real estate? Like that's not much. It's like, what do they say about professors in college?
Those
They're
who
good at
can do
teaching, not at,
teach. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there. I mean, I think there's definitely some truth to that. I got my master's and I was going to get my PhD, and there's a good portion of people, professors or, PhD individuals who academia is all they've ever done. They don't really teach, or they don't really work. And then I've had a couple professors who got their master's, then went and worked in the industry for 5 years, and then came back and got their PhD. And I always felt that they were a little more on top of things, understood, the practicality of that education more, appreciated it more. I did want to ask before we get off though. So you were saying that I think you said your father-in-law is currently still doing investment properties.
Correct.
So do you have any inclination or plans to learn from him or work with him in that? Just because, you do have some knowledge base now.
Yeah, we do actually. So we both invested in a medical company that's done really well. And it's they're going to sell the company supposedly next year.
Mm,
And from that, we're going to get a lot of money. And we've talked about doing low income housing development where we can circumvent the city because there's so much red tape.
mm,
It's just brutal to try to get anything profitable through state grants and funding for low income housing
right.
development. But if we have our own group of individuals that have the funds, then yeah, we would start working on some development here in Sacramento to get more lower income housing up and running.
Very cool. Yeah. Keep me in mind. We've had that conversation as well. There's a lot of availability out there for funding projects like this, but like you said, there's a lot of red tape. And in order to do it as effectively as possible, there's quite a bit of teams that need to be implemented for it. So definitely interesting conversations to have in the future. Hopefully you do get back into that, and hopefully we can bring you back on the podcast and you can talk about how you turned it around and now you have all these properties. That would be amazing, man.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, that was my dream project. And for a full year, I worked on that thing. And to see it just kind of fall apart kind of broke me.
Mm. Yep, totally
So
understand.
it would
Well,
be
we
great to get into
appreciate
it.
you being on, man. I know that everybody's time is valuable, and so thank you for the insight. And I'm telling you, like, we haven't had anybody on like this, and so I think this is such a telling, thing that can happen within the industry. And I hate to say it's like a cautionary tale, but definitely it just shows people like, hey, this isn't all glamorous. This isn't, it can be very difficult. It can sometimes mean you have to reset or whatever it is. So thank you for giving us that insight.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, people will kind of hear this side of the business because most of it is, all flash and glamour. But then it's like 80% of realtors quit the first year because it's not easy at all.
Yep.
Very difficult.
Well, we appreciate it. And guys, thank you so much for being on. As always, this is the Hard Money Show where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. You guys have a good one.